So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rentia Landman. I'm an organizational psychologist and a mom of two incredible children aged 13 and 16, making this topic a very relevant one for me, both professionally and personally. And in the professional space, I wear many hats, but today I'm here as the co-founder of Career Thinking, an initiative developed in partnership with GSA. And at Career Thinking, our focus is to equip individuals, both young and old, to navigate career decisions with greater clarity, self-awareness, and confidence. And today's session is really at the very heart of this mission, not to just provide us with tools, but to create meaningful mind shifts, particularly then today for parents who are trying to support their children without taking over their journeys. In fact, this inspiration for the session took shape when I sat down a few weeks ago and I started writing down my reflections in a blog post, which I titled From Helping to Empowering, a Parent's Role in Their Child's Career Journey. And in this reflection reminded me that real empowerment starts when we shift in our role from solving to supporting, or from directing to walking alongside them. So today is about that, about stepping into a mindset where we can support, and where support means our presence, not pressure, and where career conversation becomes opportunities for growth rather than problems to be solved. So with that said, I'd like to introduce you to my two specialist guests and friends and colleagues that have agreed to join me here today. I'm truly delighted that they agreed to come and share some of their expertise with us. And so first, Pippa. Pippa is a registered industrial psychologist and a career coach who works with children and young people across all ages. She runs her own private practice called Pippa Rock Consulting, and she recently found a deep passion for supporting young professionals, those navigating their first big decisions around their careers and even career changes in their 20s and 30s. And her insights into the evolving nature of career identity is truly a gift to the world. Thank you, Pippa, for being here. And then we have Jo Kluter. She's a registered psychometrist and a career coach. Her private practice is called Teen Life. And as the name implies, she focuses especially on teenagers and young adults. Jo is not only a seasoned professional, but she's also a mom to two boys, or rather young men, I guess. And she combines her professional background with this personal lived experience, and that brings a sense of warmth, structure, and a deep care for the work that she does, and helping young people, discover who they are before deciding what they want to do. And I know that a practical and grounded approach has been pillars for many families who have relied on her over the years. So Jo, thank you also for agreeing.
Thank you.
Okay, now that we know who we have in the room, let's get started. We've arranged our thoughts into two main themes. The first being what we called truths about career decisions. And the second main topic was the role of parents. So at the center of all of this, we believe, we hold a belief in career thinking, that career decisions are more than just choices. They're opportunities for our young people to gain self-insight and to practice self-management, which is one of the most critical skills for thriving in today's world of work. So as we step into the heart of today's session, we'll start with the first of the two main themes, that being the truth about career decisions. These are big picture realities that we as career practitioners encounter again and again, and they speak to shifts in the world and shifts in how careers unfold and in what young people actually need in order to navigate these shifts well. I'm going to ask Pippa to kick us off on the first section and speak to us on the first topic, which we headed Career Decisions Are Ongoing, Not Once Off.
Of course. Thank you, Rentia, and thanks so much for having me. It's so lovely to be here. And yeah, it's a big one. And for me, it's really one of the most important things that I think I have learned, personally too, but definitely professionally, working with people of all ages. And so this is relevant to the 15-year-old as much as it is to the 65-year-old or the 55-year-old, right? And it really is this idea that career choices are not a once-off event. If we just think about that, we often think that there's this idea that like we have to have it figured out right at the beginning and early on, and we have to make this like perfect decision. But really, like that, I don't think it's fair, and it's certainly not realistic. And the reality is that we as human beings are always on a journey of becoming, right? We're changing, we're evolving, we're growing as people. And so who we are at 15 is very different to who we're going to be at 25 or 35. And so it's important that we have an awareness of that and how we are growing and changing and allowing ourselves to do that. Of course, right, it totally does not take away from the fact that every decision we make at those different milestones is really important, and we need to be cognizant of that and give those decisions right the time and really effort in thinking through them. But one of the things that I really like to speak to my clients about, again, of all ages, but particularly the young adults and teenagers, is this idea of how often when we think about making a career decision or starting off and thinking about what we might want to do with our career, we often think that we have to have this like perfectly laid out plan, right? And it's like a map, right? Like if we think about when we use a GPS, right, in 400 meters turn right, this absolute definite step-by-step plan. But the reality is that it's actually more about developing a compass and having a compass. And if you think about when you use a compass, right, you hold it flat and that little dial in the compass might move ever so slightly, but it gives you a sense of kind of a general direction as to where you're going. And for me, it's really about thinking, how do we develop that compass within ourselves? And that compass looks like understanding our values, right? What matters to us, what is important to us, who we are, and holding fast to that as we think about how do I apply that to my career and perhaps what I want to do. And having that compass really helps us like understand the complexities that we're navigating through and how we keep making decisions as we become and as we change and evolve and grow as humans. And so with that compass in mind, again, instead of having this kind of perfect detailed plan that if you perhaps fail to follow, then you're off track, thinking of using that compass to go, how do I make decisions that are like stepping stones in nature, right? Making one decision, getting clear on that, and then coming back to them and keep breaking it down, right, into micro decisions that can lead me to a place where I want to be with that compass in mind. And when I think about this idea of a map versus a compass, for me, it's not only a much more compassionate approach, I genuinely believe it's actually a very strategic approach, because the reality is like the world of work today is changing at such an incredible rate. I think we can all agree that we don't know what's going to happen next week. Never mind, in 5-10 years time when perhaps our children are entering into the workforce. And so taking the pressure off of having to have this perfect plan that the reality is with the way the world operates might not materialize is not helpful. And having a compass really actually allows us to kind of think more broadly and allow ourselves the space to go, well, as the world of work changes, as I change, right, I can be flexible and adaptable to what might come up that maybe I didn't think about at certain points. And so there's a huge amount of possibility that can come from that for me is really important. I think it's also important to say that, of course, how we as parents and guardians and adults in teenagers' lives, like how we talk about these decisions and how we talk about, having a compass and the way that the world is evolving and changing is really important. And so the language we use, the kind of energy that we bring into those conversations, of course, can have a big role to play in how they feel about them and how they feel about developing their own compass and using it. And I know we're probably going to unpack that a little bit more later on, but just being really cognizant of how we as the adults speak has a big role to play in their sense of self, like building a sense of resilience, but also very importantly, I would say building a sense of self-trust, so that when they have that compass that they've, really spent time thinking through and developing with your support, they feel comfortable enough to use it and they can trust themselves as they make these these decisions. And so it's a big one, but a really, really important idea that no, there's no perfect plan. Develop a compass. Don't worry about the map.
Thank you, Pippa. I think what I really appreciate about your perspective is how it gives us as parents permission to also loosen our grip a bit, and to hold these decisions more lightly, knowing that it is an ongoing journey and it's not a one-time pass or fail that we've got to get right. And I think that sets us up for perfectly for the second truth that I want to explore through Jo, and that we phrased, there are many valid paths to success. So Jo, please speak to us about the idea of broadening our lens. There's often so much unspoken pressure to follow one very narrow path, and that usually looks like university. And I know that you've been a strong advocate for helping families consider what's right for this child, not what is common or familiar.
Rentia, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. I really appreciate it. And as you know, career guidance and educating parents is one of my passions. So yes, university is not always the option. We traditionally want to invite or motivate our children to go to a traditional universities, and they still do offer wonderful courses, and some of them are ranked in the top universities in the world. So I don't want to give the impression that one should not send your child or motivate your child to go to a traditional universities. But there's a lot more flexibility within the South African educational environment. Public universities have come on board with amazing courses, flexible academic programs. Some are more, even if it isn't a university, their courses is much more practical inclined than those of a traditional university where you study and you have to write exams. Their programs is much more project-based, which is also allowing them to be ready for the working environment. There are reputable colleges that one can also consider. They offer diplomas, high certificates, and short courses that one can offer. The only advice that I would like to give is, even if you broaden your perspective, there is always the colleges or a institution where you think, okay, this is a great opportunity for my child, just to a short course that they can follow, just to find out if this is the direction that they want to go into. There is a caution that I want to mention, and to make sure that the institution you choose is either registered with the Department of Higher Education and Training, or then with SAQA, the South African Qualification Authority. It is critical that you do make sure that that the institution is registered. And if you're not sure, you can always contact SAQA because they've got a list of these institutions. Another option that one can consider, if your child doesn't, I'm mentioning child because it doesn't matter if your child is 32, they're still your child. So a child can also look at vocational work, practical work experience. If they're not sure to study, and we will discuss this a little bit later on, each one of us have got our own pace and our own direction that we want to follow, and maturity. Even as adults, we differ. And it is then important to offer your child the option of going to work for a year, to find what is their passion, what are they interested in. And as important that Papa have mentioned is that it is not a map. It doesn't mean you have to go to a traditional, because you went to a traditional university, they should go to a traditional university. So focus on the compass and not the map. Just closing off with an example is, I had a parent who I kept on advising to say, but you don't have to send your child to a traditional university. And they were adamant. It was like almost a reputational crisis. What am I going to do? And I must also say, I was also guilty of that out of personal experience. I was devastated when my one boy was not accepted into one of the best universities in South Africa. And I was thinking, okay, this is the end of the world. And another door just opened up, and he went into a practical direction, and he is so happy and he's so successful. He started work and he is successful. So I think we must stop thinking of just a university option to study. Thank you.
So I love the balance that you bring with your technical clarity and sound options and such personal compassion. It's also freeing for me as a parent to hear that success doesn't have one look. I have one academically brilliant child, and I have a dyslexic child, and I know their paths are going to look very different, and they're equally intelligent, and I know they're going to be equally successful one day, but their paths to get there will look different, and it's useful to hear from someone like you who deals with this on a regular basis, that that's okay. And I think that brings us then to the second part of our discussion, where I want us to kind of change the lens slightly and maybe look towards those themes that we've clustered as what is the role of us as parents in this career decision. And yeah, we're shifting the spotlight there not to what's changing out there. There's a lot changing out there, but rather to what is within our control and how we as parents can show up in here in our homes, in our conversations, in the spaces that we create for our children to think and talk and grow. So the first point, which again I'll admit it's close to home for me, as I also kind of reflected in the blog, that I too potentially, I am truly guilty of a little bit of unintentional helicopter parenting. And as soon as I see my children experiencing some strain or anxiety or stress about these big future career decisions, then I want to jump in and help. So the first topic that we have there is create a safe space, not a strategy. Pippa, please share with us your perspectives and insights on this one.
And this is definitely something that's really close to my heart. And I suppose I want to say, like, I see this all the time, but I can completely understand and imagine, right? Like as a parent witnessing your child and teenager like making big decisions and thinking through these things that are really hard. Like we feel the discomfort and we want to take their discomfort away. And so it's such a natural, like human response to want to jump in and help and support. But sometimes we don't realize that we're taking away the opportunity for them to think through these decisions themselves. And so really, like, support is not about having the answers. It's not about necessarily coming up with the plan for them, but actually to create a sense of stability. And as we like to say in psychology, like holding space, right? Creating a space for them to share their thoughts, for us to listen, to show that we're listening, but also very importantly to ask questions. And even just perhaps like, you know, when they come to us, because that's the big thing, right? It's creating that space, because really for the most part, like our children just want to be able to know that if I've got something on my mind, if I'm worried about something, I can come and talk to you and you're going to listen. You're not going to judge. You're not going to jump in, but I can talk. And so the simple act of saying, like, thank you so much for coming to me with this. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. Like, this is a big decision. This is hard. And thank you for trusting me with this, like, goes such a long way. And that's so important. And so, you know, that just signals to our children that it's okay, I can talk about this. It's also okay for me to be confused or uncertain, and it's not the end of the world. And so a big part of this idea of holding space, right, and creating the sense of stability is, one, to be really intentional about listening. So not jumping in, right, showing that we're listening through perhaps our body language, but also once we've listened, to respond with questions that are open-ended, right, that are not going to necessarily produce just a yes, no answer, and I know sometimes it can be hard to get answers out of teenagers sometimes. I totally get that. But to ask questions in a way that can really like generate a conversation and encourage them to think for themselves. And so when we ask questions like that, right, that can also help them build a sense of confidence in themselves. And so a question, for example, right, is if your child does come to you and say that they're really stressed about this decision, maybe it's, you know, making their subject choice or thinking about what they want to perhaps do after school, is saying something like, you know, what does feel tricky about this decision? Or like, what are you really curious about? What are you interested in learning more about? Or one of my favorites is giving them the opportunity to make a choice around what type of support they need from you. So being able to say something like, would you like us to brainstorm ideas together, or would you just like for me to listen to you and we can come back to this at another time, right? And when we ask questions like that, we really give them a sense of ownership, right, over what they need from us. And of course, they can guide us in what type of support they really want from us. And so I think, you know, often we think we've got to have the answers laid out for them when they come to us with a concern, but actually they're not necessarily wanting the answers from you. They're just wanting to know that they can come and speak to you. And that presence, that warm and inviting and encouraging presence, is so much more valuable than any concrete action plan that you could give as a parent. And I know that it takes courage from a parent's perspective to hold back on jumping in with suggestions, but that's really, with most of the teenagers that I speak to, that's really what they're looking for. And so that is the ultimate form of support, is just a space and a listening ear.
Okay, you're really triggering the coach in me, because what you make me realize is that if we jump in and we pretend to have the answers, and let's be honest, we don't have the answers either. and I think in doing that, we might be signaling to them that they should have the answer, or that the answer is simple, and it's not. And so to just be in that space with them, to go, yeah, I can see why it's a difficult one, and it is. And you know what? We're going to figure it out together. Not, and that kind of, it helps me to go back to that original point of going, it isn't a linear path. It's not going to be crystal clear now, but let's look at what do we know, what is certain, and to believe that the answers are in them. And through the questions, and I think I really love the questions you've given us, we can help create the space for them to discover their own answers, as opposed to us taking the pressure to give them the answers, which would never work for them in any way. And it's courageous, but it's also a decision. It's a decision that we need to make first. So I don't have to have the answer. It's okay for me and for them not to have the answer. That's, for me, it feels like a starting point. So maybe before we move to the next point, is there anything that you want to add to this from your experience?
Yeah, I think it is something that I think I would like to also address a little later on. So if I repeat myself, apologies. But for me, the coaching mentality, and you mentioned it, Rentia, is to rather go into coaching mode. And it sounds now, okay, but I haven't had training as a coach. How must I do this? And it's purely just asking questions and understanding what your child is going through. So, and it's literally you need to be cognizant of the fact that don't go into a telling mode, go into a coaching mode. And I appreciate the valuable questions that Pippa have shared, because it's always difficult. Okay, but what questions must I ask? So yeah, that for me is crucial, and I appreciate the questions that Pippa have shared with us.
Thank you. Sure.
I suppose, so you're also reminding me, like, absolutely, sometimes coming up with the questions is the hardest part. And when in doubt, if you're not sure, the simple, statement of, I'm really curious, tell me more, right? And always surprise what comes out. So don't feel the pressure to have the perfect question. That goes a really long way.
I agree. All right, so Jo, this does lead us actually beautifully into the next one. When we headed, we kind of gave that one the topic of support self-discovery and development at their own pace. Talk to us about what that means to you.
So for me, the one thing I also want to take out of what Pippa have said is that we need to create a platform for our kids to be able to talk to us. Especially with teenagers, they will go into their room, they will have a difficult day, they may be liked, had a crush and the crush showed no interest. They got a bad mark, just something happened, their hormones is all over the place, they walk into the house and they just slam the door. And then you're like, okay, well, whatever, I just don't have strength for this. And sometimes you need to be brave and go in and have that discussion with them just on how was their day. But the important factor is once you start getting to know your child, is to also know that you can't compare. And we, not just comparing our children, we compare ourselves with each other. And the wonderful necessary evil that we have is social media. So we keep on comparing ourselves with others, and so we compare our kids with one another, and we also compare our siblings with one another. They, your brother is doing so well in school, why are you not doing? Or you're not doing your homework, but your sister homework is always done. Why do I always have to struggle with you? And that comparison breaks their self-esteem. And then they start doubting their own ability. So it is important when it gets to career choices or even subject choices, where you may have one child that is very academically inclined and another that is more hands-on problem-solving type of individual. So focus on your child's strengths. What are they good at? And I know with our busy schedule these days, it's very difficult to spend time with your child. But every moment when you pick up your child from school or of, their extramural activities, have a chat with them. How was their day? What was great about their day? What was bad about their day? How's their homework? Do they have a lot of homework? So get to understand what your child is faced with. Sometimes they had a fight with a teacher, maybe necessary, maybe unnecessary, but the fact remains is it was not a pleasant experience for them. And once you have got that open dialogue, you can start understanding what is your child's interest and where you can give them more exposure and experiences. And I've just recently, and it sounds strange to say recently, but it was so evident to know that experiences shape interests. So what you are exposed to would then sharpen your interest in that specific area. So, and that is why you sometimes sit with a child that goes to university and they year in or 6 months into the course, they're like, no, but this is not what I want to do. I want to do this. But they never knew about that course. They never were aware that that is even an option. And it is difficult because now you can't go and expose your child to everything because then it's also going to confuse them. But focus on what is their strengths, what are they good at. I even and it was a little sad for me where I had a discussion with mom the one day and she said to me, but I don't know what my child must go and study. And I said, but what is she good at? And she looked at me strange and I said, does she love baking? Does she like organizing things? And she couldn't answer me. And that for me was very sad, to know that you live with somebody and you don't know that person very well. What is their interest? What is their concerns? What is their love? What is their dreams? Their dreams might be unrealistic. But the important factor is make sure that each child that you have, and that I want to say work with, but where you have your relationship with your child is different from each of your children. That you don't sit with, again, the comparison, but that you build that relationship with an individual that is an individual. It's not a copy and paste from the other child. And then the important factor is rather don't pressurize, but offer encouragement, because that allows your child to know that you are there for them, and that you can support them in whatever decisions they have to make. And then with the discussion of today, the important factor is a career decision.
Thanks. Pippa.
If you don't mind, Joe's
Yes.
helping me formulate a thought, which is also just this idea of, like, when we as the adult show interest, of course that helps us, right, to be able to ask those important questions, because we're asking from a place of awareness and knowledge of our children. But also I think there's something really important to be said about when we take the time to know them and have those conversations, it also helps them understand themselves and perhaps verbalize things. And often from verbalizing things, it can take them down a journey of further research or self-discovery, or ideas that can come up for them. And the reality is, we spoke about it a little bit earlier, but to also just solidify it, is that making good career decisions is actually coming from a place of knowing myself. When I know myself as a person, then I can translate that into, well, how do I want to show up in the workplace? What type of work might I want to do? What work do I not want to do? But if we don't have those conversations and encourage, our children to learn that within themselves, it's going to be so much harder for them to do it. So it's such a multifaceted thing, in the sense of the ripple effect is so huge when we really do have those conversations.
Thank you both. And as I'm listening to you, I think what I'm hearing is, yes, there is a lot of pressure and the pressure sometimes comes from parents, and oftentimes it doesn't. Oftentimes the comparison comes from teachers. Why aren't you like your brother or your older brother or sister? Or it comes from peers. Or, I mean, if I'm thinking of a friend of mine, her eldest daughter she came out of the womb, she knew she wanted to be a medical doctor, and she's on her way to that. And the poor second child is following that and going, I don't know what I want to be, and that makes me wrong. And so just that, the parents do not buy into that at all. They love and treasure every child, but the child is taking on that pressure because my older sibling is modeling this clarity. I should have it too, and to be able to work with them and go, but you don't have to, and you're not broken if you don't have that clarity. That actually reminds me. Joe sent me a beautiful TED talk the other day, and we'll post the link in the chat or afterwards on the video. But a lady that spoke about her own lived experience, and she coined the phrase multi-potentialites. And these are people that have multiple interests that can deep dive into and get very passionate about something for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they lose interest and then move on to something else. And yeah, if you're looking for that, what is the one thing I'm going to become, that could make you feel like I'm broken and I never know what I'm going to be. And then what's beautiful and inspiring about this is to hear from someone like that how all of those things can come together into something amazing. And there's a superpower in that which we often don't appreciate. So even just exposing our kids to videos like that, inspirational content, to go, you are different, and that's okay. Different does not mean, it doesn't mean broken or that you're lesser than. It is just different. And so, yeah, those are the things that I think as parents, we can support them in celebrating who they are. Okay, now let's turn back to Pippa and speak a little bit more about a more subtle but a deeply influential part of this parent-child dynamic. And this one we gave the heading, be aware of what we're projecting. Pippa.
Yeah, this is an incredibly tender topic, and one that requires a lot of self-awareness within us as the adults in the conversation. And that is this need for us to be really super aware of what are our thoughts and feelings and emotions that we are experiencing around where our child perhaps is at, and what they're thinking or not thinking, right, around their careers, and what am I bringing right into the conversation. Because the reality is, when we do talk to our children, they can feel and sense the energy essentially that we're bringing into that conversation. We don't even necessarily need to say anything. They can feel it, and it might look like, you know, a frown or a look that they interpret as something that, oh, like this is a no-go zone, right? And it can really have a big role to play in how they feel about, of course, one, approaching you to talk about this, but also the subtle message that, like, maybe this is a bad thing to talk about, right? I can't talk about this, or I'm making the wrong choice. I'm doing a bad thing, when we can feel this energy and kind of discomfort. And so it's incredibly important here to bring in the topic of emotion regulation. This is really where it comes in. And I mean, this is one of the most important things I find myself speaking to clients about of all ages, which is, you know, having an awareness of how we're feeling in a conversation and being able to metabolize it and be aware of it so that we don't take it out into the conversation. And so it's important that we're cognizant of what are the messages or the beliefs that I perhaps have around, you know, the world of work, and what is a successful career, what does success means, what is a good job, what is a bad job, and how those thoughts, right, are ultimately influencing how we feel. And when we can be aware of that, right, we can, in a conversation with our children, can be more discerning around how we navigate it. And so if you do find yourself, right, in one of those conversations and you're noticing a sense of anxiety or fear emerging within you, and often we can feel it quite viscerally, like, and physically, right, we can feel it in our chest or in our stomach or whatever the case may be. It's really important for us to very simply, right, take a pause and take a really, like, meaningful deep breath, and asking, like, ourselves, you know, am I responding to perhaps my child's fear or concern, or is this my own fear? And it always reminds me of that beautiful quote that's attributed to Dr. Viktor Frankl, where it says, you know, between stimulus and response there is a space. And it goes on to say, in that space is our power to choose our response, and our response is where our growth and our freedom lies. And that intentional moment of a pause and a deep breath goes a really, really long way. But from that, right, that breath can create a sense of clarity for you, but also like a moment of reflection. And if you can, and if you're willing and can be vulnerable, sometimes it can be hugely powerful to say to your child, like, I am noticing I'm feeling anxious right now, but this is something for me to hold, not for you to hold. And just by taking a moment to verbalize that is profound. Of course, the language there is really important. It's that I am noticing, right? That is an important part. And I am, and being able to name that emotion is really important, because then it also gives them the permission to go, okay, this isn't for me to hold, but it's also modeling emotion regulation in action. And so if you're willing, if you can, like, that can go a long way. And again, from that place of perhaps taking a space, right? This is where the need for encouragement comes in, that Joe was also speaking about, right? Is like being able to say, it's okay to feel unsure. I know this is a really big decision, right? And you don't have to figure it out all today. You know, that permission, and to say something like, you know, I'm walking alongside you on this journey, and whatever you're feeling, right, I'm here for you. those things are, as I say, like they're subtle, but actually incredibly significant, and it takes a lot from us as the adults in the room to be able to do that, especially when there is so much going on and there's so many fears that we have, and those fears come from a really good place, but to be intentional with that pause. Please don't underestimate the power of a pause, and being able to verbalize what you're feeling.
Oh, thanks, Pippa. I think this topic is one that we can probably do a whole session around, because I'm also sitting here and realizing that even just the dynamic between parents can have an influence on the child. And I think we've seen this play out on subject choices where dad believes you have to take pure math and mom knows you're not a pure math child and you're never going to need it. So why put yourself through it? And mom and dad ends up fighting about it. And the poor child in the middle, no one's actually even asking them, what do they want or what do they think? All they're hearing is, I'm going to upset one of my two parents by whichever choice I make. And that's not a place we want to leave them in. So to, again, notice that this is our stuff, which probably comes from our own individual experiences with math when we were back in school. This is not our child. We should not be bringing that into their decision. And again, what I love what you're giving us is noticing that, owning our feelings, pausing, and then deciding how we want to show up for the sake of our child, to turn their attention back to theirs, not ours. But we can only do that when we notice. I'm aware of the time, and as much as I'm dying to hear Joe's view on this, Joe, I'm going to ask that. I'm going to probably direct you to the last topic because I don't want to miss out on that one. And that one, really shifting our attention to something a lot more practical and empowering, around how do we navigate? There's so many voices. Yes, there's us as parents influence, there's the peers influence, there's the teachers influence, and these youngsters are sitting there often not even exactly sure who they are, and they're needing to make these decisions. So would you mind talking to us about the last topic, which we phrased as use tools that empower, not pressure?
So one of the points, and I'll anyway link into what was Pippa saying earlier, but one of the things that is an important factor is information, and there's so much information out there. And one of the competencies that have been found that is underdeveloped is critical thinking. So how do you firstly ensure that something is AI generated? I mean, these days you look at a video or you look at a picture and you're like, yes, that is great, you know, and then when you actually go and have a look a little closer, you see, but it's actually ridiculous. So it's literally looking at things critically, and just emphasizing the factor of what information is relevant, what experience is relevant for my child. When we go back to not comparing, what did they show interest in? And then going back to the coaching mindset of asking questions and determining, is this relevant? Is it relevant information? What I want to emphasize is also how you ask the question. It's not sometimes what you say, but how you say it. I mean, for example, if your child comes home and they say, but I want to go and study up game design, instead of going, oh, that's ridiculous, how can you want to study that? I mean, you're asking a question, but it's how you say it. It's, oh, you want to just play games the whole day. So those type of comments that you make breaks them. And instead of making those comments, ask questions. Oh, where did you hear about that? Where can you go and study that? What careers can you offer or follow rather when you go and study that? So rather go into asking questions so that you can firstly determine, is this just a feeling that they got, or they heard it somewhere and they think, oh, that's cool, they want to go and study that. Instead of you breaking it down, you almost create that interest in them and say, but I want to go and do research. If they can't answer you, say, okay, but go and find out. Do a little bit of research. And the one thing that I also found in this exploring information is it creates a platform where you and your child can learn from this. You and your child can, I mean, in a million years, I never heard of a career game designer. And once my child showed interest in it, I started reading about it because it's, and one of the areas that I do want to, what I'm focusing on is to do interviews with different careers. And so I got hold of a game designer, and when I started seeing what they study and what their course consists of and what you can do afterwards, it's not just creating a game. It's a lot more than that, and it's a you learn with your child, you explore with your child. One of the points that I do also want to make is sometimes all of this information is just overwhelming, and you don't know what area. You maybe have a list now of 4 or 5 careers, and some of them are a little bit, quite from the one side to the other. So see if you then can contact a professional, get an objective opinion, somebody that you can have a chat with, somebody that can ask just a little bit of more objective questions to you as parents, but also with your child. When you go and search for a professional, it can be a career counselor, it can be a psychologist, it can be a psychometrist. Make sure that they are registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa, that you make sure that you are using a reputable professional. What tools are they using? Why are they using those tools? Is it evidence-based, the tools that they do make use of, and what is the cost? And do a comparison between the services of different professionals. And all of this would help and contribute to you eventually guiding your child through this process and then making a final career decision.
Thank you, Jo. As you're talking, I can feel that, that overwhelm, and it is reassuring to know that, there are professionals out there that, again, it's not going to come in and save the day and tell you what the crystal ball says, but that can support in this exploration process and add some insights, and either scientific or experience-based insights in there. And so I'm very aware of the time, and I know that we've got to start wrapping up. Reflecting on what we've done, I can also feel we've only really scratched the surface of everything that's on our hearts, and that I'm sure is in your minds from a question perspective. And I'm hoping that you're walking away with some insights after having experienced this today, and possibly even some new questions. Now, if you're walking away with more questions, I don't consider that a bad thing. In fact, I'd argue that's probably a bit of the point of this. As my co-founder in Career Thinking has taught me, that a question is the beginning of a quest, as the word would suggest. And that's the beginning of a quest, new insights, new discoveries, and ultimately that which leads us to growth. So this perspective is one that I believe also serves us well in this space, as we've learned today, that the space of career conversations and decisions are not about having it all figured out, but rather about having the starting points of a dialogue that will continue and that will reveal itself as we walk alongside it. So as we've run out of time, we unfortunately won't have time to go into live questions today. But that said, we want to hear them. We do believe that they will also shape how we prepare for the future sessions. So we are planning to have more future sessions where we can probably get a little bit more specific and deep dive into some more focused topics. And so 3 that we've thought about was grade 9 subject choices. I know that's a very specific topic for some. And then there's the get to grade 11 and 12. What am I, a child? How do I support them in making post-school pathway decisions? So again, that's another topic. And then young adults. We think that their last decision is, what am I going to study? And then when they finish their studies, again, there's the question of, oh dear, what now? How and where do I enter the workforce? So those are definitely 3 sessions already where we thought we could have deep dives in it. But we need your feedback. We need your questions. We also need your direction in terms of what would be valuable for you to hear us speak about. So you will receive a follow-up email from us after this. Once the video is ready, we'll send you a link of the video, and then please use that email address that we've sent it from, the same email address I've been communicating with you on to confirm the session, to share with us any thoughts, questions, suggestions around the way forward. And then as I wrap up, I want to thank Pippa and Joe for sharing your insights and perspectives and advice so abundantly. I'm blessed to have both of you as my colleagues and friends, and I trust that our contribution that we all made today will have a meaningful impact on the lives of those that have listened or that will be watching the recording afterwards. And then for those of you who showed up here today or that made time to watch this, I honor you for not doing this only for your child, but also for you as a parent as you navigate this evolving role of supporting your child through their career decision, seeing how they unfold to become the people that you dream for them to be. Thanks very much, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rentia. Thanks, Joe. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.